I lay awake again, flat on my back, staring at the pale bands of streetlight sneaking through the blinds and striping the ceiling where the fan's shadow cut them into pieces. I knew those faint lines by heart after so many nights like this. The digital clock glowed in the darkness, the minutes crawling, each one needling me with the reminder that time kept moving while my mind tangled itself into tighter knots. The sick churn in my gut felt familiar now, like a small dark animal gnawing from the inside. My wife, Nora, slept beside me in her usual careless sprawl, one leg kicked out from under the sheet, an arm across a pillow, hair in a loose snarl around her face. It used to look charming. Lately it felt like there was a clear, silent border etched between us. Even the way she angled her back made it seem intentional, like she was turning herself away for show, and it left me feeling stupidly alone. We had been married 25 years. In the past month, everything shifted. Not a slow drift, a lurch. The change began in bed. The steady, almost scripted routine we had kept for decades was ripped up. Overnight, Nora grew bold, insistent, experimental. She pushed into things she used to shut down with a grimace, tried positions we had never even discussed, and made breathy sounds as if she were on a set. You would think I would be thrilled. At first I was. Then the timing began clawing at me. Where did this come from so suddenly? After more than 2 decades of predictable intimacy, the only explanation my gut would give me was that she was borrowing someone else's playbook or practicing for someone who wasn't me. It sounded unhinged, but the thought sank its hooks in and would not let go. A friend once joked over drinks that a switch like that is a dead giveaway. If your wife changes from shrugging to superstar, check the phone. He was trying to be funny. I treated it like a warning light. Once the idea landed, I noticed everything. New outfits. Perfume for a quick market run. A new phone code. The device glued to her hand. The dread thickened. I caught myself studying her face for signs of guilt and secrets. At night, I replayed every new noise she made, every unexpected touch, every distant look in her eyes when she thought I wasn't paying attention. My mouth went dry. My chest thumped. I whispered her name in the dark. Nora. She twitched, then kept breathing evenly. Maybe she slept. Maybe she pretended. The refusal to talk poured gasoline on my anger. I rolled onto my side and tried to swallow it. It didn't budge. I raised my voice. Nora, come on. I know you're awake. She groaned, annoyed, which told me enough. My pulse spiked. Being ignored on purpose burned worse than the questions. Why did you change the way you are with me? I asked it flatly. I have known you for a quarter century, and suddenly you are someone else. Is this from a video you saw, or from someone you met? She kept her back to me, went stiff, then muttered that it was too late to fight. It was exactly the time, I said. I was not sleeping anyway. I was losing my grip. Was she seeing someone? Was that why she had turned into this new person? She rolled onto her back, hair spilling over the pillow. You are being paranoid, she snapped. Why can't it be that I finally wanted something different? My hands trembled. Because you used to act repulsed by certain things, and now you lean into them like you were trained. Do not tell me I am imagining this. I know your patterns. This is more than a sudden open mind. She flung her forearm over her eyes. Mark, enough. I am tired. That triggered something mean in me. Convenient, I said. Energy appears when you try new tricks, but when I ask honest questions, you shut down. She slapped the mattress. Be quiet, she hissed. I cannot deal with you. Heat surged through me. Fine, walk away again. Pretend none of this counts. She grabbed a spare pillow and stomped across the room. The whole light cut a thin blade of brightness over her jaw and furious eyes. Guest room, she said, voice shaking. Enjoy the silence. Do not forget your phone in case your side contact messages you, I threw after her. She halted, shoulders tense. You will regret that, she whispered, voice wet at the edges. You are such a... I cut her off. I hired a private investigator. I will know everything. The breath she sucked in was sharp and loud. She fled without another word. The door stayed open. A minute later, the guest room slammed. The muffled crying stung somewhere under my anger, but I stayed frozen and stared at the ceiling until morning bled in. I left the house before sunrise just to avoid round 2. My eyes burned. My nerves buzzed. I savaged a treadmill and a weight rack until my arms shook. Pain gave me somewhere to put the panic. After the shower, I caught my reflection. Brown hair veined with gray, lines at the corners of my eyes, a little over the belt. 50, almost 51, and I felt every day of it. What I saw most was fear. A man braced for proof that his wife had been unfaithful. I swung by the house to grab work files. I hoped Nora would be gone. No car in the drive. Relief. Inside, voices drifted from upstairs. My daughters. Lena was 21, Tessa 20, both at university. They did not drop in without warning. Maybe Nora had called them. I stood at the base of the stairs, pressed to the wall, listening. "Mom is going too far," Tessa said. "She told me about using that Pure app to meet men. She said it is easier to hide from Dad than she imagined. I did not think she would actually do it." I froze. Lena's voice shook. "We sort of suggested it, remember? The open marriage idea. We told her it might spice things up. We never thought she would run off meeting strangers." Open marriage ricocheted in my head. My daughters had floated it. Nora ran with it. Tessa made a small hurt sound. Now she is meeting men behind Dad's back. If he finds out we practically planted the idea, he is going to hate us. I felt something give way inside me. "We just wanted them to fix things," Lena said. Mom said she was bored and that Dad never listened. "We figured some couples try an open thing and talk it through. We assumed there would be a discussion." "She never told Dad," Tessa said. "She just jumped into it. She uses that dating app to chase a thrill. This is terrible." I could not listen hidden any longer. My head buzzed. I stepped back and called up the stairs. "Lena, Tessa, down here." Silence fell immediately. Footsteps scrambled. They peered over the banister, pale and wide-eyed, and then came down like they were headed to sentencing. "What did I just hear?" I asked. Lena started to answer, but Tessa burst out that it wasn't what I thought. I raised a hand. "Do not minimize it. You two mentioned an open marriage to your mother and pointed her at that Pure app." "Right." Their faces crumpled. Lena swallowed. "We never told her to cheat in secret. We said if you both agreed on an arrangement, it might help. She was complaining that you never tried anything new, and we thought doing it together might help her feel less trapped." My chest hammered. "You understand how twisted this sounds. You are my daughters. You essentially gave your mother a green light." "No," Tessa said, crying now. "We only mentioned it. She claimed she would talk to you first. We never thought she would go behind your back." I stared at the carpet to keep from exploding. "Get out," I said, voice tight. "I cannot look at you." "Dad, please," Tessa sobbed. "Go," I shouted it. "Leave. Give me space." They ran for the door with wet faces. The slam echoed. I sank against the wall and felt old. That afternoon, I met with the investigator at a greasy spoon on the edge of Cedar Ridge. Hank was in his 60s, lean, wiry white hair, eyes that said nothing surprised him anymore. He slid a folder across the booth. "I gathered more since last time," he said softly. Inside lay photos, call logs, transcripts. My stomach lurched. The first picture showed Nora stepping from her car in a tight dress I had never seen. Another showed her entering a highway motel with a bald man. Stamps on the edges read, "Dates I did not want to read." Hank tapped the first shot. "That is Colin, one of the men. Met through Pure. They met at a cafe, then the motel, then his apartment." I felt heat in my face. My wife at that man's apartment. For how long? He slid another set. "This is Erin from Vermont. They chose a midpoint for dinner and spent hours at a bed and breakfast. They checked in, left separately 4 hours later." Each word drove another inch of metal into me. He showed me screenshots. "This is from a user called Nacho Man. Real name Max. Looks like one in person. Lots of explicit texting. I scanned messages that felt like rattles in a box. Max. You like it rough? I have toys. I can bring a friend. Nora under a handle that made my skin crawl. Not sure yet, but you only live once. Maybe if I feel brave. I had to stop reading. Hank closed the folder and apologized. I told him to send the final bill and stumbled out with the file under my arm. That evening, I spread the photos and transcripts across the dining table like a crime board. Nora came home and stopped in the doorway when she saw it. What is this? She asked, her face draining. I tapped the papers. Your side project? Names, dates, addresses, Colin, Aaron, Max, ring a bell. Her mouth opened and shut. She finally managed to accuse me of violating her privacy. I laughed without humor. My wife meets multiple men, and the invasion you care about is me knowing. She glared, and her eyes filled. I told you I needed excitement, Mark. I tried to hint, so it was my fault. I waved the page with the bed and breakfast. Our daughters told me about the open marriage talk. They said you would come to me first. She went rigid, caught between shame and defiance. You would never agree, she said. You are so closed off. I had to. No, I said. You took an idea they threw out, and instead of an adult conversation, you downloaded an app for anonymous hookups and lied for weeks. She shot back that I would have slammed the door, that she was drowning in boredom. Did sleeping with random men fix anything? You did things with them you never tried with me. That is a line I cannot forgive. You unlocked a version of yourself for them and hid it from me. She cried and said she feared I would see her differently or turn her down. You had a choice, I said. You could have ended this marriage if you were that unhappy. Instead, you detonated it from inside. She slammed a hand on the table and said she had no voice, that I dominated every decision. I told her she broke everything. She grabbed her purse and fled upstairs. I sat in the wreckage and watched the ceiling like it could tell me how to breathe. A couple of days later, I returned to collect documents for a lawyer. The house was empty. When I came back the next day, Nora was pacing the living room, with her phone gripped white knuckle. Did you tell your parents? She demanded. They have been leaving messages, calling me a disgrace, like I am some walking scandal. I dropped my keys and said yes. They asked why I left. I told them the truth. She twisted with anger. You had no right to turn them against me. This is private. Hard to call it private when you are at motels, I said. You humiliated me. I will not protect your comfort. Do you enjoy seeing me vilified? She asked. Spare me, I said. You boasted to the girls about being bored and about meeting men on an app. I am not playing along with poor me. You do not understand how stifling it was, she said. You never listened. Everything had to be your way. I was desperate. Desperate enough to go behind my back with 6 men. If it was so bad, you should have left. She shook, then said she messed up. But I was not a saint either. Look in the mirror. I said I had looked and found a man who had been lied to and was done. I was filing for divorce. For a second her face crumpled like she might plead. Then her expression hardened. Fine. Good luck finding someone who can stand your rigid rules. Maybe your next wife will not need a trainer to learn new moves without you. The line hit like a slap. I forced myself to walk out instead of shouting. The door thudded behind me, and I felt fury braided with relief. My boss and close friend, Stacy, owned a small cabin by Lake Halcyon, about 30 minutes from Brookhaven. When I told her what was happening, she offered the place. I arrived with 2 suitcases and nerves humming. The cabin was simple and clean. Living room, galley kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bath. The window framed rippling water and dark pines, and for a moment the sight smoothed me out. I did not sleep much the first night, but at least I was away from the battleground. I ignored Nora's calls. My daughters texted apologies that alternated between frantic and quiet. I sent curt replies that I was safe and needed time. I worked remotely, took calls, walked the shore when the walls pressed in, and rented a kayak when my legs felt restless. Every time my mind wandered, Frames from the investigation flashed like a carousel. The "you only live once" line. The man who admired her feet and commented on her arches. The bed and breakfast halfway across the map. My stomach clenched anew each time. About a week in, a car crunched the gravel. A soft knock. I opened the door to Lena and Tessa with takeout coffees and a paper bag. I wasn't ready. They saw it. "We are sorry for ambushing you," Tessa said quickly. "We just want to talk." Lena handed me a mocha latte, my favorite, and I let them in. We hovered around the small table. I told them I did not know what to say. "You are my daughters, but you steered your mother toward a plan that did not include me. How do I get past that?" Lena's eyes filled. We were foolish. On campus, everyone talks about poly and open this and that, and it sounded normal. We never wanted her to cheat. We thought if you both agreed, it could diffuse the tension. Mom took it and ran without you. I sighed and said they could see the crater it left. Tessa said they loved me. Loved her too, but knew she had crossed a huge line. I said they might not have wanted it, but that is what happened. Every time I think of the mess, I remember Pure. That meat market of an app. Lena dropped her head and said Nora told them after the fact how easy it was to hide, and it made them sick. The anger drained just enough for grief to move in. I said I was not erasing them from my life, but I was hurt. I could not act like everything was fine. They cried. I let them hold my hands and blinked away my own tears. They promised to give me time and left me staring at the lake as the door clicked behind them. The weeks after felt like dragging my feet through wet sand. I stopped by the house to check mail and gather files. Nora and I rarely crossed paths, and when we did, the air snapped. Once she was heading out in a short skirt and barely looked at me. I imagined where she was going and had to force my jaw to unclench. Words spread in our circle. Friends called to offer sympathy or fish for the details. Carol said Nora bragged about meeting a man with a worship kink. Another friend spotted her at a bar with a heavily tattooed guy. It made me sick and confirmed she had stopped hiding. Maybe this was who she always wanted to be. Sometimes I tried to remember the good pieces. The wedding. The infants who became our daughters. But each good memory flickered behind images of her new nightlife and the social posts about freedom with strangers draping arms around her waist. Eventually, I sat in an office with a divorce attorney named Natalie, a colleague of Stacy's, who specialized in messy cases. I handed over the reports, the photos, the statements. "We are in a fault state," she said. "Infidelity matters. It can affect alimony and division. Are you ready for a fight?" I told her I wanted it to end, without watching my savings evaporate. She said we could press hard, but if her side countered with claims that I was emotionally neglectful or controlling, it could drag on. I rubbed my temples and said I was furious and exhausted. I wanted fair, not retaliation. Let me keep my retirement intact, and we can split the house. She nodded and said she would prepare the papers. The last big clash happened when I met a realtor at the house to discuss listing. Nora leaned on the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone. The realtor walked the yard. Nora said she would not clean and that I should hire professionals. I laughed and said she was in real estate, but she claimed she handled deals, not scrubbing. She said she was done bending and owed me nothing. My temper rose. I told her I had not forgotten that she was busy meeting men from Pure. She told me to stop bringing it up. I said she was proud, posting about foot fetishes, and you only live once and whatever else. She accused me of judgment and of playing victim for sympathy. I told her people could see what she had done and make up their minds. When the realtor came back, we both went quiet. The tension was a wall you could lean on. I grabbed my keys and left without another word. She did not stop me. The divorce finalized on a cold, gray morning. We sat side by side while our lawyers did the talking. The judge asked a few things and struck wood. 25 years lay behind us, like a building knocked down with one swing. Outside the courthouse, we parted without a handshake. I watched her get in her car and drive off without looking at me. Relief, sorrow, and bitterness stirred together like wind over the lake. I tried not to picture her next moves. Someone said she sold her share of the house and rented a sleek place downtown in Ashford, near clubs and neon. She wanted freedom. Fine, she could have it. I was done trying to rescue a ghost. I stayed at the cabin a while longer. The sign went up on the lawn. Prospective buyers walked through and left polite notes. My daughters checked on me now and then, cautious, asking how I was sleeping and whether I was eating. The sharp edge of my anger toward them wore down. They had been naive and wanted to help, however misguided. They were carrying their own guilt and watching the wreck from the shore. I started packing the remnants of my old life into neat boxes, files, a few framed photos I could stand to keep, tools from the garage. The rest stayed. A cleaning crew came through, and the place smelled like lemon and loss. The realtor's sign took on a bright pending banner, and then an offer came in that we both accepted without a fight. We signed papers separately. I picked up my share of the proceeds and drove back to the lake with the envelope buckled in beside me like a passenger. At the cabin, I tried to carve out something that looked like routine. Coffee at dawn. A walk along the shore until the sun cut diamonds on the water. Work calls. Groceries in the small town market where no one knew me and no one asked questions. On good days, I could forget the timeline for half an hour. On bad days, I could feel the sequence of images flare behind my eyes and had to grip the countertop until it faded. Lena texted a picture of a stray cat that had started sleeping on the porch of her rental. Tessa sent a photo of lecture notes. They were reaching with small, ordinary things, and I did my best to meet them there. We kept calls short. We pretended to talk about school and weather and coffee. Under it sat the same shared ache. I told them I would visit once I moved into a place that was not a borrowed cabin. They said they would wait for me to be ready. Stacy came by on a Saturday with groceries and a toolbox. She tightened a loose cabinet hinge while I held the door. "You look less haunted," she said. I told her I had slept 4 hours in a row. It felt like a miracle. She asked about counseling. I said I had an appointment with a therapist in Ashford. "Good," she said. "You do not have to carry this alone." Therapy was a quiet room, a glass of water on a small table, and a woman named Dr. Patel who took notes with a quiet pen. She asked measured questions and let silences sit. I told the story from the beginning without raising my voice. I described the bedsheets, the sudden change, the stairwell, the diner, the folder, the paper spread over the table, the courthouse. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she said something simple about grief being allowed to arrive in waves long after an event. She said I could feel anger and still protect what I valued. I nodded and did not trust myself to speak. When the hour was over, I walked 3 blocks to a sandwich shop and ate at the counter like a person in a training exercise learning how to be in public again. A small apartment opened up on a tree-lined street in Brookhaven. 1 bedroom, tall windows, a narrow balcony that looked down at sycamores. I signed the lease and moved in the next week with what I owned. I bought a second-hand couch and a new mattress. I hung a single painting of the lake. The first night I stood on the balcony and listened to the leaves move. It was not the cabin, and it was not the old house. That felt like a beginning. Nora texted once about a piece of mail that had gone to her by mistake. It was an insurance notice. I said she could leave it with the building manager, and I would pick it up. She replied with a thumbs up. No other words. The distance felt both clean and cold. A few mutual friends reached out with careful messages. They asked how I was doing, said they were here if I wanted to talk. I said thank you, and kept the calls short. I wanted the circle small. Carol told me in passing that Nora had listed some furniture on a community board and had started going out with a runner she met at a volunteer 5K. I did not ask for more. I did not need a fresh storyboard in my head. Lena and Tessa visited the new place on a Sunday after brunch. They brought a plant and a set of kitchen towels with little fish stitched into the hem. We hugged in the doorway. They walked through the rooms and complimented everything, careful with their praise like they were testing ice. We sat at the tiny table and ate apple pie they had brought from a bakery near campus. At some point, Tessa started crying silently and trying to laugh at the same time. I got up, grabbed napkins, and stood there lost between wanting to be a father who fixed things and a man who could not. When she could speak, she said she was sorry again. I said I knew. I told them I loved them. I told them they did not have to keep apologizing forever to stay in my life. A bit of tension left their shoulders. We made a plan. We would have dinner every other Thursday. If someone needed to miss, we would reschedule. We would keep it ordinary. No long speeches. Just show up and eat and talk about classes and books and whether the sink was still leaking. That would be our repair work. At night, I sometimes dreamed I was still in the old bedroom, watching the fan shadow slice the ceiling while the clock blinked. In the dream, I would get up and open the door to the hallway and feel a rush of air, and the house would be empty. When I woke up in the new apartment, there was only the sound of traffic and my own breathing. I would go make coffee and watch the light creep over the floorboards and try not to read meaning into small things. Work steadied me. Stacy piled a new project on my desk and said I needed something to carry that was not personal history. I built a plan, pulled a team together, and spent a few late nights on video calls steering details into place. The sense of competence felt like a handhold. Small wins stacked. A client praised a presentation. A junior teammate thanked me for taking time to explain a deadline. I went home and slept 5 hours. On a gray afternoon, I met Hank to hand him the last check for his time. We did it in the same booth as before. He slid the receipt across and asked if I needed anything else. I told him no. He said if I ever did, he would be around, then looked at me for a long second, and said I was doing better than most he had seen. I nodded and left without looking at the wall where the clock hung. In therapy, I talked less about Nora and more about my own shape. What kind of man I had been inside the marriage, where I had been stiff or afraid. Dr. Patel did not push blame in any direction. She asked what I wanted to cultivate now. I told her I wanted to be present without trying to control outcomes. I told her I wanted to be honest without raising my voice. She said both were skills, and that skills took practice. When my first Thursday dinner with Lena and Tessa rolled around, we made pasta and a big salad, and ate it on the balcony even though it was chilly. We wrapped ourselves in blankets and passed a bowl of olives back and forth. The conversation wandered. Tessa talked about a professor who wore the same tie every Tuesday. Lena said her cat had decided the toaster box was a permanent fort. We laughed more than I expected. When they left, they hugged me in the hall for a long time. I stood there after the elevator closed and felt a tired kind of peace. I still thought about Nora. Not all the time. Often enough. Sometimes I pictured the day we had both walked out of a building years ago, with rings on our fingers and a sense of adventure, and I tried to line that up with the courthouse morning when we did not even look at each other. I tried not to turn it into a looping story. It had happened. It was over. The work now was mine. Spring slid towards summer. I planted herbs in small pots on the balcony and burned one of them by forgetting to water it for a week. I replaced it and set a reminder on my phone. I bought a used bike and rode to the lake before work. I nodded at the same older man who walked in a windbreaker every morning, and he nodded back. Ordinary rituals grew like grass. One evening, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened, it was Nora's voice. She sounded tired and slow, like she had just woken from a nap. She said she had found an old photo of the four of us at the beach and thought I might want it. She said she would leave it with the manager if I cared to pick it up. That was all. I stared at the waveform and then deleted it. The next day, I stopped by her building and retrieved the photo in a large envelope with my name on it in her handwriting. I carried it home in my backpack and stuck it in a drawer without looking too long at the smiling faces. I kept going to therapy. I kept the Thursday dinners. I went on 2 low-key dates after a colleague set me up with a teacher and then a graphic designer. We met for coffee, talked about books and travel, parted with polite hugs, and did not pretend it was anything more. It felt human to sit across from someone and talk about their day. A storm rolled through one weekend and knocked power out on my block for 6 hours. I lit a candle and read by the window until dusk. When the lights snapped back, I felt a strange gratitude for small, reliable systems. Light, heat, water. A lock on a door that belonged to me. I washed the dishes and made a list for the grocery store. Months after the court date, I stood at the lake and watched a small sailboat tack towards shore. I thought about how hard it had been to stand on the kitchen tile that evening with the photos on the table. I thought about the nights at the cabin when I woke and had to walk around the living room just to keep from coming apart. And I thought about the dinners on the balcony and the way my daughters had leaned against my shoulders while looking at the street below. None of it made a clean narrative. It didn't need to. On a Sunday morning, I rolled the bike out to the sidewalk and decided to take the long route to the water. The air felt bright. I passed a woman walking a dog that looked like it should have been a cartoon. The dog sneezed and shook its ears. I laughed out loud and kept rolling. When I got to the lake path, the older man in the windbreaker raised a hand, and I raised mine back. The surface of the water ruffled in the breeze. I stopped, put a foot down, and let the sun sit on my face. For the first time in a long while, my chest felt light.